All right. Do we have audio? We're good? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here at the ION and have our conversation today about how do we foster sustainability initiatives using data-backed storytelling. And today the topic of sustainability is an interesting topic. It's definitely top of mind for a number of people. And today we're going to have a little bit different type of conversation where we are going to, from MesoConnect's perspective, we take and BGSS, we take a customer experience approach and incorporate that and help organizations build strategies through to implementation for how do we connect strategy to implementation and tell that story and connect on that emotional level. So our partner today, BGSS, who are data analytics, machine language, AI subject matter experts, will also join us at the end of the event. And we want to also have a special thank you to AWS for sponsoring a portion of this event as well. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Dr. Masud, who is one of our distinguished guests for the day. He is the chair for the anesthesia and critical care for the Medical Center for Houston Methodist Hospital. I want to get this right. There's so many accolades here, so we're really happy to have him. Houston Methodist Hospital oversees 8 hospitals, ICUs, and VICU across Houston. He also serves as the vice chair for quality and patient safety and associate quality officer. He serves on the board for Houston Methodist Board of Directors and the professor for clinical anesthesiology. He's won many awards and recognitions, including the Presidential Gold Medal, and has been a recipient of the Golden Apple Award for Excellence in Teaching 4 times. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Masud to do our initial opening. Yep, you can. Okay.
Thank you, Bryce. Well, good morning. I'm in a strange environment. I know you're not used to seeing a doctor, and in fact, actually, my background is I'm actually a cardiac anesthesiologist and a critical care expert. So I rounded at 6 in the morning so I can be here for whatever 2 hours something. So my partners are covering me. Let me kind of tell you a little bit that. Part of the thing of being a critical care doctor, most of the world got to know about critical care unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic. You got to know us. You got to know what we end up doing for the world and everybody across kind of thing wise. And it's not only me, a lot of nurses and everything. So this is, just to give it an insight, interesting I'll tell you is that critical care, is something you have to explain. And I jokingly tell people that you really don't want to see me professionally, because you have to be very sick to see me. And I don't wish that on you. Anyway, with that being said, so it's really, I want to kind of share why we're here and why it is so important for you all to think that this is an area which deserves and needs engagement and learning mutual. So this is really the topic, creating greener ICU today for tomorrow. And one of the background really is that when I start looking at it, my colleagues actually in New Zealand and Australia were way ahead of us. But when I looked around in the US, there was nothing there. And, when I talked to my colleagues, my friend in New Zealand tell me your journey, and they said, okay, Faisal, tell us about your ICUs and everything. I said, in Houston Methodist, I'm responsible about 350 ICU beds. So we had a Zoom phone call, and she paused. She said, you know what? In the whole country of New Zealand, we only have 280 beds ICU. So the impact that we potentially can play, even in Houston Methodist, is huge in the whole country of New Zealand for critical care. This is our Center for Critical Care. We have all across the city. about almost 1/5 of all admissions which get admitted into Houston Methodist Hospital are in the ICU, about 23,000 patients. And I'll come back to why the geography is important in these things, and we are expanding and expand that. It's very important because our Center for Critical Care and institution really represent 80% of the healthcare demographics in this country, except the rural healthcare. So Green ICU, why is this important? It's very, very important to me to do anything for myself, for my colleagues and everything. It's the most important piece is the why. If I can't explain the why to my team members and colleagues, to all of you, then it's all pointless. The why is so important. Healthcare contributes to 5% worldwide greenhouse effect, Regional variation impacts, for example, in the US, the carbon footprint of healthcare is approximately 10%. Can I have a show of hands on people who knew this information? We are, we do a lot of good stuff trying to save our lives and everybody's life. Within healthcare and hospital system combined, they have a huge footprint. An intensive care unit, which I represent, contribute 3 times the greenhouse impact. Why? Any takers? Because when we are saving lives, we have people on ventilator, drips, blood, drugs, everything. We're using so much stuff in there. That's one of the reasons why. So intensive care unit is the most research intense environment in an institution and in a hospital-wise. The estimated carbon footprint of U.S. hospital shows it is per ICU is about equal to a car driven 500 to 1,000 kilometers per day. In U.S., with the most conservative estimate, the number of ICU beds, it translates to about 100 million cars driven per day in the U.S. 100 million cars driven. How many people thought about that? I think that's not chump change. I think you all can make and help us do better and ourselves do better. That's very important because if you don't understand the scale and think we can't make a difference in impact-wise. Let me give you one example. We all get X-rays, CAT scans, MRI, and all this. This is the carbon footprint of IV as far as consumable and electricity-wise. If you look at, again, an MRI, setting an MRI, doing an MRI, this is the footprint of an MRI on the extreme left side. Then the CAT scan, then an X-ray, and then ultrasound. We order these tests like hundreds and thousands. It's really mind-boggling. So again, the scale is important. Okay, all right, I'll stay in the. I'm walking out. I'm sorry, I'm not. It's hard for me to contain even in my ICU. I walk around, so I'll behave. Okay. All right. So this is some of the resources that we use. Look at the number of gloves, drugs, isolation gowns, liners we use in a very typical day. This is not common. I was rounding on my patients. 4 of my patients were in isolation. To every single time I have to change every single thing to go in the room and then come out and dispose of that. That's a lot of things wise. And again, COVID highlighted that. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to put the facts of I'm giving you a glimpse of my world. So why? The most important why at the forefront for any physician, any nurse is the patient. Patient trumps everything. For us patients and the local community that we serve. So why is important? Equity. Most of the patients who are not very well financially, they are more vulnerable to all of these things, and anything which raises the healthcare costs, they get disproportionately impacted. Any kind of environmental change, whether it's water supply, electricity, or anything that impacts them much more. So equity is very important. And being a Houston, which is the most diverse city in the country, and our institution representing pretty much all areas of Houston, this is important. Access. When storms happen, when climate change happens, when floods happen, what happens? You can't get to the hospital. You can't get to the emergency rooms. We've lived through this with so many of these Katrina and all the stuff. So access becomes an issue. So this is not trivial. Okay? Cost. Supply chain. Huge impact wise. Anything that impacts, let me tell you, when we were trying to struggle to get gowns from overseas because we ran out of gowns and masks and everything, it becomes, our institution is paying 5 times the price. And the more frequency of these events, the overall cost of healthcare will be increased. Quality. When we're scrambling to do things and to serve so many patients with so many, wise, the quality has a potential to get compromised. So the first thing is patient. That's the case I was making to my nurses, to my colleagues and everything. Our first priority is patient communities, because if we are able to work and engage, that is make an impact wise. So green ICU is not a choice option for any of us. Innovation research, we have to learn to do better with less resources, do more with less. Do we need all these supplies? Do we need all those things wise? Leading medicine. So when I looked at the data, what is, and this is talking about more than a year ago, I was trying to understand what is happening in the US in the critical care world. There was nothing published. There was only one paper and some has looked at some waste. There was no guidelines, there was no strategy, there was no vision. In fact, our NHS in New Zealand and Australia had done a lot more. So this is something which we really have to do. When I came out and really went out, our society was engaged, and hopefully in 2025, this will be one of our agenda item also. Healthcare team. Most of the healthcare, especially in critical care, are nursing staff. Most of the nursing staff are young ladies in the age of 20s. To them, this is very important. Climate change is not a trivial concept. So in order for me to really engage and say, well, this is important for you to work with us, they want to be part of an organization who have this thing wise. Environmental dividend, you all know more than me. And the financial dividend, somebody is paying for it, directly or indirectly. So this is the why. And this is the why which led to this thing. So we start kind of doing that. And these are some of the sustainability pillars, which you'll hear from Jason Fisher, who are sustainability officer, as to how those things. And, again, I purposely made it to some degree complex, because I always want to think that doctors are very mysterious and complex. We don't want to share all the trade secrets, but there is a lot of good information there, all right? So the why and how, do more, and rethink, reuse, reutilize, these are some of the pillars wise. Again, I'm mindful of my time, so I want to behave also. This is an example of 4 or 5 ICUs in which our pharmacy collected or medication which could not be utilized for a variety of reasons. This is just a snapshot of 5-6 months of data. So we end up wasting $110,000 of drug waste, just a small sample of very small number of beds. This is just because I said, okay, what happens? Again, somebody's paying for it. And if you look at wastage, there's a lot of hours wasted to stock them, waste them, categorize them, and not alone to even manufacture and dispose everything. So this is not trivial. Again, this is just a sample. The good thing is, when we got them engaged, a lot of ICUs and their team member came up, okay, we want to do something different. This is just a small sample of the projects. One of the most common drug used in any hospital is what? Anybody takers? I know you're not supposed to know the answer. This is rhetorical. Oxygen is the most common thing wise. We use a lot of oxygen, but do we need so much oxygen for every single patient? So we're trying to look at that. Fluids, IVs. You cannot escape in a hospital unless we poke holes in you and get IVs, get blood draws. We love needles. Well, we love needles, you hate needles, but we use a lot of resources for that. So these are some of the sample. Again, this is not meant to give you into detail from me, but just to give you that when you engage people, they want to do that, but we need help from all of you. We want to learn from you, want to make a difference, because you can see 100 million cars a day. So we want to take it nationwide. I want to engage my colleagues all over. We want to really publication how to do these things. We actually have a paper already done. In fact, we're about to submit it in the next couple of weeks to really lay the pathway for how to do it. And we want to work together with our colleagues across the country and with you all. So I think I behaved in my time period. I did not go right. Okay, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Masud. So my background, and initially, my degree was in cognitive science from Rice University back in 1996, which is an interdepartmental major between cognitive science and psychology and computer science. And so it has always been a story of mine to ensure that in many of the technology projects that I have done, there is very solution forward types of thinking. And I have always worked and advocated for how do we incorporate the human centricity in portion of this. If if at the end of the day, if the humans that we are making the thing for are not willing and able and prepared to utilize the technology that we're deploying, then we will never get that return on investment. So we focus quite a bit on ensuring that organizations can get the return on investment on the technology and solutions that they work on, ensuring that we deploy human centricity in what it is that we do. And often this cliche of if you build it, they will come is could not be further than the truth in the technology world. And so we try to incorporate that in everything that we do. So how do we do that? So from using a customer experience methodology, one of the first steps is employ who are the personas of the people that are going to be utilizing the solutions that we're working with, and that is a starting point. So from a sustainability perspective, what's interesting is that sustainability is just as much, if maybe not more so, a technology and solution forward. There are many solutions involved, and often in what we read and the conversations that we're having, that if we deploy this technology, if we deploy that technology, if we process the water this way, whatever the case may be, it's often very solution forward and often does not do a great job of connecting with who it is that's ultimately going to receive the value from the solution that we're deploying, right? And so in many of the challenges that we've seen in the sustainability world is often those of us that are involved in the sustainability initiatives, we have a grand remit. Often it's we want to save the planet, we want to make the world a better place for all the people that are living here, and so on and so forth. But from a change management perspective, there's the old cliche, what have you done for me lately? Right. And so it's important to understand who is it that is receiving the message that we are conveying. And from a sustainability perspective, there are so many people, right? And the executives obviously are a key piece here. But there are investors, and there's a number of different kinds of investors, which I'm not illustrating here, but there's the standard investors, there's activist investors, there are the employees themselves. Jason, I remember the story that you had mentioned. The CEO from Houston Methodist sent out an email announcing the establishment of the sustainability office, and that email that was sent was the most interacted email in terms of people responding to the email, the surveys that went along with it. There were a number of survey responses, and so from the employees, people want to go to work for a place where they feel like they can make a difference. And often as individuals, we have a hard time. Like the recycling, for example, does it make sense for me to recycle? Is it actually going to the recycle place anyway? What is the city of Houston doing with any of that recycling? Who knows, right? So, but as an employee for an organization, and organizations have the responsibility of deploying solutions that can scale at a broad area, and the employees have an opportunity to work for that organizations and be involved and really make meaningful change. So employees know and care very, very much so. And then, of course, Dr. Masud, you had mentioned on your slide the community in which we're deploying these solutions to, that we want to make the immediate community that we're working in a better place to live and work. The government officials, like we're trying not to make this a political conversation today, which it certainly can be. The term ESG is even a debatable term for people, whether or not we even want to use that term anymore. And of course, the suppliers that are working with are often very much so. So as we're building and conveying our messages for who our audience is, it really makes it's very poignant to understand who is receiving that message and what's in it for them. And so from deploying a customer experience approach and revising the strategy or aligning the strategy, we take those perspectives into account to ensure that we're building pieces that are connecting with our audience, and that And then ultimately, as we're deploying it, are we able to go back and revisit those and ensuring that we're highlighting the specific pieces for them that's going to resonate? And if we are not doing those, then we have blind spots. And I'll give you an example now, where some of us hope there's no Shell employees in the audience, but this is a great story, and this is all publicly available information. So I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but it's an interesting story, and it's a story that repeats itself. We know that Nike had some problems, Volkswagen had some problems in terms of big grand announcements, but this is one from Shell. So who is the audience for this statement? Right, it's a tricky statement that he made in a public announcement, and again, it sort of conveys this grandiose vision for what it is that we're trying to do. But who's the recipient of that, and how are they receiving this message? So, oh, I lost my slide. We had a technical difficulty. So I'll talk it over, but in we all know that the Paris Accord in 2015 or so that was signed, and Shell wanted to take a leadership role and announce a number of sustainability initiatives. And in 2017, Shell came out and made public announcements about what are those sustainability initiatives. If you look at their stock price at that point in time, their stock was edging up and edging up and edging up. And then in 2018, there was a lawsuit filed against them from a Dutch activist organization that Shell ultimately lost that lawsuit, and a landmark lawsuit that they had to pay. Do you recall how much it was? Something. It was a massive dollar amount that I'm not prompted here on the teleprompter, that they lost in 2018, and their stock prices started to slide thereafter. In 2022, the CEO stepped down, and in 2023, the new CEO came in and announced advancement of their core business operation budgets, and what he glossed over was they were cutting their sustainability initiatives. And then 6 months later, the sustainability director resigned outright. Right, and so it's just a great story, I think, to sort of illustrate that while we have this grandiose idea about what it is that we're trying to do, I think that there were a number of lessons there in terms of blind spots, and introduced some potential problems. So I felt that this was an interesting quote to illustrate from an unlikely source about that if we want to be leaders and we want to fight for the things that we want to fight for, it's important that we bring the other people along the way. And how do we do that? We connect with them from where they are. So that's all I have. Anybody? With that, I think we can bring on the panelists. Ben Ramsey, my VP for Business Development, and I will let Ben, you can introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, hi, I'm Ben Ramsey. I'd love to welcome the panelists up here. We'll just go ahead and have a seat, and I'll introduce everyone once we get situated here. So thank you very much, Bryce. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here with you. I am Ben Ramsey. I lead business development for MesoConnect, and have been working closely with some of our clients as well as partners in discussing this topic, both in terms of projects as well as around this event, and really excited to be here with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and do some quick introductions, and then we're going to jump right into the panel based on some questions. So this is what I have to my who I have to my left here, Claude Griffin. He is the chairman of the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for joining us, Claude. Welcome. To Claude's left, we have Robert Boyajiv, who's the area manager for Siemens Energy Performance. So working closely with clients on sustainability initiatives that they have there. On my far right, we have Jason. Hi, Jason. Jason Fisher, who is the VP of Sustainability for Houston Methodist Hospital, closely with Dr. Masud. And then to my right here, I've got David Reid, who is the CTO and CMO of NOV, which is an oil and gas manufacturer. And so all this panel here is well versed in this topic, and so we're excited to kind of jump right in. David, who are your sustainability stakeholders, and how do you decide what's important to tell them?
Where it matters for us really is inside the company. So how employees feel is a big driver for us, for employment as well as motivation. In the leadership team, it matters as well. So for us, we're always driving towards business solutions. And so sustainability has to work that way. It's can we find ways to actually have long-term improvement through programs that work. So that's really our goal. It's less external. It does matter to the market, not as much as you would think. It has changed over time. But really, the community, we're less of a PR company. So we're less out there, not looking for a particular buy-in. People don't know us on the street. But our customers are looking for solutions, and we like to provide solutions. So that's really where our map is.
I'd love to get, Jason, your take on this. I know we've touched on that as well. And then, yeah, can you jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So when looking at healthcare and who our stakeholders are, really at the core of everything that we do is the patient. Patient we put first. And when we look at who is our patient, it's not just patients from the community, it's also our employees and our employee family members. And so it's a wide-reaching aspect as far as those stakeholders who firsthand receive the care from Houston Methodist. Beyond that, it's not just the communities, but it's healthcare at large. You know, looking at Houston Methodist being a top 20 U.S. News and World Report organization, healthcare organization, we have a duty to lead in healthcare to provide a positive example for other hospital systems and to work with other hospital systems to advance sustainability. Beyond that, we could really get into the details. As the stakeholders, I don't think that there's any really fine line of who is not a stakeholder. Our vendors, we work with them. It's an important part of everything that we do, being able to bring in the supplies and provide unparalleled safety and quality in the work we do, incorporates those vendors as well. And when we look at what information, what data that we look to share, how we determine. Now, that's something that we're still on the journey of. We've been established for about 1 year, and we're still learning that there's some ways that we've engaged with our employee stakeholders to learn more about what is most important to them and what is relevant to them in the world of sustainability. When I joined, this role has expanded drastically, and there's so many opportunities across the board and across so many functions and business units that we really have to do a great job of stepping back and diving into those stakeholders and what's important to them to be able to prioritize those items that's important for them while also aligning our needs and determining what is appropriate from a operations standpoint and a financial viability standpoint.
Makes a lot of sense. So we've got internal stakeholders, we've got customers, we've got partners. Robert, you work a lot with different clients, and maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the systems that you plug into, but I'm curious as to how, when you're in these projects, who are the stakeholders that your clients are most interested in bringing into the fold, so to speak, and helping them understand the initiatives?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ben. I'm just looking at this wall right here, and there's some big names on that wall, and just think about, when we're talking about sustainability, and you look at our footprint, we're about 12 million metric tons in terms of our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. That's If you looked at the overall emissions for the U.S., that wouldn't even be a wedge. It wouldn't even be traceable on the overall emissions. But look at our customers, so you think about our customers, it's about a 16x. Our products, that 12 million metric tons, ultimately translates to about 190 tons of carbons reduction, 190 million metric tons of emission reduction for our entire customer base. That starts to have a wedge. That starts to see a noticeable wedge on the overall emissions for the global footprint. So first and foremost is our customers. That's where we can have the biggest impact. But it's also the communities we work in. So I'm always been a big believer in, if we're going to solve some of these massive community challenges, we got to put academia, we have to put government, and we have to put industry together, a true ecosystem effect. And the reason why I bring that up is because the opportunity, this is a massive economic opportunity, unparalleled probably since World War II. If we are truly going to decarbonize our economy, it's about $120 trillion opportunity in terms of socioeconomic mobility. My team personally wants to bring that to our community because these are good paying jobs. These are areas where you can start having a difference in the community. And just take this space. There will be some entrepreneurs that go through this space and will start having an impact on their space. So I think the community is a big, big stakeholder.
Thank you. A quick show of hands here. Who in the audience is responsible for sustainability initiatives at their organization? Somewhere. Awesome. And then who plays a show of hands on if you support those different initiatives in interdepartments or within the overall. Cool. So a bunch of people here that are obvious stakeholders of this as well. Right now, we are obviously in a pre-regulatory environment in the United States, but that's not necessarily the case globally. There are regulatory frameworks and enforcement in Europe, et cetera, that force companies or require companies to take action on this. That's not necessarily the forcing function here. Claude, how do you think about companies and why are they doing this now? If there isn't a regulatory framework or requirement, what are the motivating factors for companies today to invest in sustainability initiatives?
I think there are several reasons, one of which is it's the right thing to do. I think they see the value in sustainability, and there certainly are financial benefits associated with it as well. When you take a look at the longevity of companies, it's part of the vision. In order to be around for a long time, it's going to take sustainable practices to get them there. From a business council perspective, we convene businesses from a very broad cross-section of industries, whether it's energy, oil and gas, utilities, as well as academia, NGOs and the like. We convene them on various sustainability-related platforms. Here's an example of a platform, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Another would be just carbon collaborative as a whole. Within those platforms, we have working groups, and the working groups consist of representatives from the various companies that are very intent on making impacts, positive impacts in those spaces, not only for the company's sake, but also for the benefit of the community. I heard that mentioned several times already. So the companies recognize the importance of making a very positive impact in the community. As a business council, we assist the companies to come together on those topics that by themselves, they are not able to make the impact at scale. However, when you bring together the large companies, middle-sized companies, as well as the small entities on the topics that are very challenging to address, you have an outcome that is closer to meeting the scale that needs to be met in those respective areas. And I think the last point I want to make on this topic is we apply equity across all of our platforms. We ensure that underrepresented communities are represented as part of the Carbon Collaborative specifically. We do know that in some communities, they are more negatively impacted from a health perspective. we want to ensure that they're a part of the solution. And so we reach out to minority serving institutions and have them actively participate in the meetings. And in addition to that, we also want to encourage them to develop initiatives within their respective institutions that are more geared to, number one, engage, introduce the topics in their respective areas, and number two, where curriculum development is an opportunity, we assist with that as well.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think also, I mean, Robert, what about enterprise value as a reason for doing these sustainability initiatives?
Good question. I think the trend, I think investors are starting to want data that's auditable. So, there's been a lot of debate on how to standardize ESG. And I think what you're going to look at is transparency. The more methodical you can be about reporting your numbers in an intelligible, auditable way, that's going to build confidence for investor confidence in a company that does it the right way. So you're seeing the banks starting to do that. You're starting to see a big movement now where Wall Street is saying, if we're going to invest in our infrastructure, what are some of the sustainability metrics? Who are the supply chain? There's one thing I really want to share with the audience, because there's a lot of sustainability folks in the room. Companies that do sustainable investments in terms of their supply chain and their overall footprint are usually lower risk for the investors. That is, if you can look at that up and down the chain, there's a lot of data that supports that. So if you can make that more transparent, auditable, it's going to build enterprise value.
And that's from resiliency gains, right, within the organization, efficiency gains, et cetera.
You have to walk the talk. You have to walk the talk and, look at your own footprint, and then resilience is definitely added benefit, how you do that. There's a very interesting case studies that we've been involved with. And again, some of the names of the company, some of the names on that wall, they're doing some really cool things, but, ultimately you have to walk the talk. Exactly.
Gotcha. David, let's see. Yeah, we got a question here from the audience here.
Sorry, this is, we only have 5 microphones, but I wanted to double down on the direction that you were going with Claude on we talk a lot about sustainability solutions. Another key component to it is the sustainable workforce. And that is a key area that I think is important. And I wanted to also take a moment to highlight, David, your also involvement. I would love to give you the opportunity to microphone. We have with about Red M and the importance of the human component to it. So I would love for you to speak to that, and I would love for you to have an opportunity to address the audience about Red M as well.
Okay, so Red M is an organization I started that helps professionals to do something about human trafficking. Mostly trying to educate people because of the risk actually in our community, but actually getting the voice up so that people can hear and understand the story about trafficking risk to your children inside your company, knowing, are you actually partaking or connecting with trafficking when you don't know it? And a lot of low-cost behaviors will drive us towards trafficking, but also just child risk, knowing a lot of professionals have had their kids taken and we've had to recover them, but explaining how grooming works to professionals actually causes us to often, people will put their hand up and say, that sounds like my child right now, to which we manage to do background work, and almost every time it's a trafficker. So that's something we do that actually ties into something societally that works alongside just that component of what are we doing, and where are we doing the right things with our communities, the right things with our families and with our companies. And so it's an organization that if you want to be a part of, happy to talk to you about. It's joinredm.com if you want to look it up. But lots of people getting involved. It's a volunteer organization. We don't have any staff or any buildings, but it's just people who work in industry and want to do something about this. So yeah, that's a large part of it. Thanks.
That's awesome. It's important work. How do you align, this is going to be a hard transition, but how do you align different sustainability goals within the organization? And what are some of the challenges in doing that?
Interestingly, it's at the management level more than it's inside the organization because of the business aspects. When you get inside the organization, I mean, we're very international. We're in all renewables. So you described us as oil and gas, but our rig business owns our wind business, and the wind business is bigger than the rig business. So it's a growing market. But we gathered a lot of employees originally before the leadership got there and kind of brainstormed what can we do in this space, and we came up with about 20 different businesses, 9 that were already active. So we do solar and geothermal, which, by the way, on the hospitals, that's a great solution, is actually having low-grade temperature geothermal at your hospital can take massive load off of your carbon footprint. But yeah, we're in geothermal, we're in biogas, wind, solar. There's things that we're in. The employees, particularly Europe first, I would say, want this badly because they can feel the burden because it's being talked about more there. But you're right, generationally, people want to do something. And so for us, the balance has been the conversation over the economics. It's great to have government funding to do things. It certainly has benefited us, but ultimately, can things run? Can they functionally work? And that's a big challenge. It takes you to a lot of different solutions. So we have a good R&D set of projects. We're actually building towers. So you have been importing towers. I can't say much about the trafficking side of it. Is there something happening there? For solar, it's the most trafficked device that you have is solar panels. Your low-cost solar panel came from parts of China where people don't get paid to do that. They're doing it as a punishment and a correction. But that's why it's so cheap. So you have to ask questions behind what you're doing. So similarly, we bring in towers from other countries. We've actually built a system where you can take the raw steel and build the tower on site. And so that actually causes it to be sourced and manufactured in country. So that's a move that we're seeing more, which is good. But there's cost challenges with that as well. So we're always looking for, can we design and improve the cost model on any renewable? So about 7 years ago, that was our opening gambit, and we've been finding ways to take cost out of the system, and similar to what we did in oil and gas, but applying it. We've had the same in geothermal, really exciting stuff. Instead of trying to make components work at high heats, we've been making wells operate at lower temperatures. And so we've been getting clever ways to keep wells cooler so we can actually drill further. Our first entry into geothermal, we improved their drilling performance by 60%. At first, they didn't want to spend the money because they were trying to save cost. When they spend the money, of course, a 60% improvement is pretty big. So continuing down that road of, can we find creative ways? We find that business has to be there for the leadership to buy in, longevity concerns over government initiatives. I've had to convince our leadership the governments are going there, so calm down. It's going to be okay. Can I show you how developers make money? No. Can I show you how roads were a great business idea? No, but they were a good idea. So it's the same thing. They're going this way. And so we're getting in with governments, which is different for us, and really helping them think through how do we get these things solved. And there's a lot of problems in this space, which means there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, we hear so often that companies, especially at your size, participating in the, sort of environment now in this pre-regulatory state allows them to kind of shape what some of that regulation can kind of look like.
And I think it's funny, when we started, a lot of the employees were like, why don't we tell these stories of great things we're doing? And I said, well, our CEO has a problem amongst his peers. He doesn't want to lie. And people love to tell stories of great things they're doing, but they're not really behind them. They're not really big things. They're just stories. So we tell stories, but usually when they're large projects and they're real. And I think that helps the employees. At first, there was a lot of frustration because we didn't look like we were doing much. But we just didn't want to do press releases for the sake of them. And so we're very genuinely doing things. And that really helps employees to buy in.
Well, it also helps that you're also genuinely manufacturing wind turbines, for example.
It's an interesting thing, but you look at scope 1, 2, and 3 for us, we're going to get hit the worst for building floating wind. It's going to be a massive amount of manufacturing of steel to solve a problem, but actually we're going to be seen as the bad guys, because when you go to manufacture, everyone doesn't realize this. A new idea is great, replacing infrastructure is great, but it's a massive load bringing jobs to the States, great. Bringing jobs in general, great. But this is a lot of things that have to get built that will have a carbon footprint, and not often talked about is what is the burden you're actually doing in creating new solutions. So there's a good balance and conversation that's needed, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't go these directions. We just should be more honest about exactly what it takes to get there, and are we willing to do that? And we should look at the whole thing holistically. But yeah, we'll be punished for being a big manufacturer that's growing, because we don't get any points for making things that help other people's emissions numbers. So it's a pretty interesting challenge.
It is an interesting challenge, but from a shaping opportunity, there's even more reason to participate. So it sounds like, I think we've established that the leadership is super important in terms of setting the right agenda and creating an environment for successful sustainability initiatives. Jason, what challenges have you seen along the way in terms of connecting the dots between the strategy level and the implementation as it comes to the success of different sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll think about that for a second. Looking at the implementation, I think that the biggest barrier is really getting the right champions to push those initiatives forward. And so when we look across the system, we've started off as a small organization of myself plus one, and we're continuing to grow. And it's a good problem that we have, but we have so many projects that are on the plate and so many people that have stepped up with interest, but maybe don't have the bandwidth to lead some of those projects for their departments or their functions. And so it's been a challenge to try to find that support to help drive and coordinate the work to be done. And there's a lot of it to be done. I think that as we move forward, we'll continue to identify those champions. And I think that's part of the conversation in learning your stakeholders, especially internally, and developing those relationships internally to find out who's going to be your champion, who has the influence, and who can also help with their bandwidth to drive those projects forward.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to get some audience participation as well. Bryce, maybe if you could facilitate a little bit. He needs to share a mic. So for those folks that raised their hand and said that they're responsible for, there we go, responsible for sustainability initiatives, I would love to put this question to you. So what challenges have you guys seen in leading and driving successful sustainability initiatives? Yeah.
So when people that are paying for the sustainability initiatives are not receiving the value, so they excuse me. So doesn't matter whether it's a school or whether it's a school district or whether it's a church or if it's a hospital, the people that are paying for the initiatives are not the ones that are receiving the value for the initiatives. So for example,
you said seeing first, sorry to interrupt, but you said seeing first and then you said receiving the value. Is there?
Yes. So for example, spending time in a school district, all school districts need to have healthy kids, right? Healthy kids are caused by having a good education. You cannot raise a child who's healthy, who's not educated, and vice versa. And so our school districts, we're fighting over everything. What do we teach our kids? And the same way all of these kids are falling down the cracks. They have no food, so we're then feeding them food. The school districts are paying for the school, not the public health departments, but the school districts. They need gardens. They need to know where their food is coming from. Who's paying for the gardens? Oh, they might get a $500 grant for 1 year, but then there's nobody to help them. Methodist Hospital, I've been trying to work with you guys to understand there's prevention before emergency response. So it's the people that are receiving the value. The children, they don't vote, so they can't pay it, and then you can't get the right people involved to continue it for a sustainable project.
Anybody on the panel want to respond to that? Yeah, please.
I think it's a good question because it's always about kicking the can a little bit and where it's going. So I think this is essentially why what we get excited about. Like when I talk about working in community, if the taxpayers paying that burden, what do they get out of it? So first and foremost, you're right. The kids need a pathway to something that is better than what they might have today, particularly in underserved communities. So the way I would solve for that, I would say, listen, let's get kids awareness around education, around what are all these wonderful careers. They want to know, they want to come work at a company like this, but they don't know how. So industry's responsibility, let's create a pathway to start showing them what does that actually look like, and intentionally build that in the classroom. Now, the funding question you brought up is an interesting one. Traditionally, we rely on taxpayer bases or bonds. We're at a point right now where there are deficits either at the federal level or at the state level. We can't keep doing that. If you look at all of the metrics where we have to fund that, we have to find more creative funding to do that. So I think this is where industry a true public-private partnership can start solving for that. So if we go into a school district, we say the buildings are falling apart, it's too cold, it's not well lit. Let's solve for that, but let's do it in a way that starts to fund, that makes sense, that provides public good, so it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything. If you can create that model and show that to the CFO, I think he's willing to listen. I think we talk about stakeholders. I think the taxpayers are willing to listen, and that's the way forward.
And
Jason,
I'm gonna.
please.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I think you bring up some great points. And I think that when you look at, from a healthcare standpoint, we are growing at an enormous rate, and Houston is growing at an enormous rate, and it's unsustainable rate. And we can keep building facilities and hospitals and clinics, but that's not tenable, especially from a financial standpoint. So we need to look at reducing the number of admissions and addressing the preventative care on the front end. And I think a lot of times that both healthcare and education are approached with problems that are outside of the scope of what they do. There may be some linking there, and I know that when looking at healthcare, we do have an opportunity and a mandate to focus on some of that preventative care. And I think there's some great things that we're looking at and addressing. I think it's like David was saying and Rob was saying, it's about the partnership and finding those community partnerships. And so one of the things that we're doing at Houston Methodist, we're developing some community gardens. We're developing one on the 14th floor of our new Centennial Tower that's focused on respite for employees and patient visitors, and also has an aspect for some of our inpatient patients to be exposed to nature for their healing. In the Woodlands, they have actually partnered with Interfaith of the Woodlands and started working with their community garden, and actually have purchased 2 plots from their community garden to be able, one, to focus on one of the plots for employees, employee engagement, education, and the other to partner with our physicians in our health and learning education facility to provide cooking classes on how to cook with some of this fresh fruits and vegetables. And I think this is an opportunity across Houston for us to really establish these partnerships and collaboratives to utilize each other's expertise and resources. We're not experts on gardens, but we want to support that in any way that's possible. There's a great organization, Urban Harvest is a local nonprofit organization that has community gardens throughout the Houston area. So how do we as healthcare and other organizations come together to better understand what they're doing and expand their mission and their scope and their footprint? In Cyprus, we have a 90-acre campus. How can we partner with some of these nonprofits to bring some of those services on site when sometimes that access to the square footage is limited? And looking at the broader scope in Houston healthcare, I think we're at a really great piece right now where, led by the Center for Houston's Future, we actually had our first meeting with several healthcare organizations and public health organizations, and we're having those initial conversations around how do we we've done a great job on the research aspect, and we've got this aspect of the care aspect, but how do we really provide implementation science between all of this information that we have and knowing that preventative medicine is really going to be a key to adaptation and not just our growth, but also to extreme weather events. And so I think there's a lot of great opportunities on the horizon, but absolutely, it's something that we all need to come together at the table and find out who has the resources and who can we tap for that expertise to partner with.
Thank you for raising
Jason,
that as
let
well.
me,
That's a super important component of thinking about the actual end customer, for lack of a better term, but not just stakeholders about who's involved in this, but the recipient of this ultimate work and the gaps that exist there. I think the types of private-public partnerships that we're talking about are opportunities to bridge that. In thinking about challenges in terms of challenges with launching and running successful sustainability initiatives. Obviously the delivery of the outcomes to the recipients is one. I know that I want to bring in David Robbins, who I know has some meaningful stories to tell here around challenges within the organization and how to overcome some of those challenges on bringing in stakeholders using data to help understand tie the strategy to the actual implementation so that people understand what's going on and how they can participate in that.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was struck by the words of the good doctor that when we began this talk, right? And he talked about sustainability, right? And that, as director of resiliency and infrastructure for Houston Airport System, right? So it's resiliency. I did a talk some years ago in Chicago, and the title of it was "Resiliency is the New Sustainability," right? The doctor noted about the efficiency of the operating theater, right? How you reuse and account for waste, right? Resiliency is also, and I want to bring the title of this discussion about data and how do you use data to tell the story, right? I wonder about how those data can actually improve the efficiency of the care, the effectiveness of the care. I know that was it McLaren Formula One racing team, right? Partnered with a hospital, and I don't know if some of you all have seen it's a TED talk. Actually, it's a great talk. It's about 7 minutes. It's worth looking up. But they talk about how they use data to improve care, right? They used one of the systems that they use for McLaren racing that draws down, I think, something more than 3 terabytes of data per race, right? To figure out how they built the effectiveness of the machine that they built, that they're going to run, and that 35% of that machine will change from the beginning of the race season to the end of the race season. And then they break the whole thing apart and rebuild a new one in the following year with those data, right? They took this system, put it in place in a hospital in Britain, and improved the care of the neonatal ICU, right? And so these data are what you present to your financial board, to your CFO, and you say we can turn a bed thusly, right? And so not only are we improving care, we're improving our throughput, right? Our bottom line. And so there's that. And another story, a great story for my airline business, right, is 2017 Atlanta. And how many of us recall the blackout in Atlanta? And some of us may have been even caught up in it, right? This 24-hour shutdown of an airport that cost the airport a $75 million check to the airline, right? So these are the stories. These are those data that we provide, right? My last note, and it's sports again. It's a talk we did again in Chicago. It was the aviation conference, but we talked all about data. And we had the captain of Team One, Oracle. And how many of us remember that win they had for America's Cup? And it was all about data, right? They were in the bucket. They were in the hole. They were going to lose the race. And they used the culmination of data science to win a race, right? A sailboat race. And so I wonder about how we take these data, these opportunities that the data provide for us, right? To tell the story, to make the case for the difference, right? And I think that it is a bottom line issue. It's the oil business as well. It's 300 plus, 325, 350 frac spread across the country, right? 2 years ago, they did not want to electrify, right? Now we're third completed and 100% by 2035, right? That's the goal. And it's 50 to 40 megawatts per frac spread. Huge lean-to, right? And it's for a reason. It's sustainability, but it's also process, and it's about the bottom line.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for that, David. Yes. Good.
So much money for water in the state of Texas, and nobody's using it. Nobody knows it. There's so much funding for renewable energy fund for the state of Texas, and there's about 5 different agencies that have renewable funds. And then you have all this disconnect, and you have Biden say, "I got all this money." Nobody seems to know how to get it, and then you have these large corporations with all this real estate, and they need renewable energy for those buildings. Need water and good food for their employees, and there's so much money out there for that they're not even using. So they have a lot of marketing. That's why marketing and sustainability are together. They're not actually doing things that are doing. So where's the disconnect with the data? Where's the disconnect from actually doing stuff instead of
I agree 100% with that. You hear about electrification and renewable energy, and it's extremely important, but one of the items that often takes a back seat to that is water and renewable water. When we look at Houston and the subsistence problem that we have, and realize that we're not drilling any more wells here in Houston, and that we're going to have an issue with access to water here in the future. It's not even just an organization or a hospital issue, but it's a community issue at whole. And, I think that when you look at the funding, that's one of the things, since I've come into this role, it's been a challenge trying to find out, especially from the IRA, what is the structure behind that? Where do you go to find out more information about applying for that funds? And everything that I found along the way, it's like, well, it's still shaking out. We're still working through that. I think I would recommend, not everyone has access to this, but our accounting firm has a lot of great information as far as the latest on how to access that funding and how to take advantage of tax credits and grants, et cetera. Beyond that, when I look at healthcare, one of the things that I see as a great opportunity is that renewable reclaimed water, also known as Purple Pipe. And so with Purple Pipe, it's in use in several communities across Houston. Purple Pipe is taking that gray water, processing it for reuse. And a lot of developments and new developments, it's being used for irrigation of lawns and public green spaces. And there are organizations that are able to do this on a large scale or even smaller scale. And one of the things that we're doing at Houston Methodist is looking at a facility. And the struggle with healthcare is square footage that you have is best utilized addressing patient needs and utilizing that for patient care. So how do we bring in facilities when there are no public access to facilities for reclaimed water? We're looking at 8,000 square feet to build a Purple Pipe project for one of our facilities or one of our campuses. It's a $20 million capital investment. How do you address that? I think you have to find the balance between the cost and some newer innovations as well. There's a great organization based out of Houston, Headworks International, that does work on reclaimed water, but it's at a fraction of the footprint and a fraction of the cost. But I don't think it's just the reclaimed water aspect. We need that in the health system to reduce our water costs and support water resiliency, but we also need it for weather event resiliency? What do we do in the event of a hurricane? And if water is tainted and we don't have access to that, whether it's coming from the municipality or otherwise, if we have another hard freeze and the pipes, the pressure on the pipes have gone down, how do we get that water for our patients and also for the central utility plant? And I think, like your organization, what's that? I think I'm familiar with this. I think with your organization pulling the humidity from the air to provide that distilled drinkable water for patients is something that I believe I've been in talk with one of your cohorts about. How do we bring that into our hospitals? One, to reduce the amount of water used for drinking purposes or otherwise. Is there a potential to utilize that water from the humidity to bring into our sterilization rooms, which uses a substantial amount of water? So I think there's a lot of great solutions. What's that? All right. Well, we'll have to get together and talk a little more after this.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
So we had, let me get back to you. Loretta is the human, we do have a question over here. I know the woman in the green dress here was also waiting.
This man in the gray coat.
Okay.
Okay, I want to refer to a few items that you all mentioned. Number one, the first speaker talked about Mr. Van Buren's announcement about moving on to the sustainable energy from petroleum. And at that time, I was a member of the Shell R&D team, Shell Technology Center. And I remember those days and how the stock prices started plunging after that. So there is a great message. It has to be balanced. And even before that, if you recall, there was a big Mokando incident for BP on the Gulf Coast, where I think 42 people died. And after that, the CEO announced Beyond Petroleum. BP stands for Beyond Petroleum. 6 months later, maybe 8 months later, that CEO had to leave. New CEO said BP stands for Back to Petroleum. So the balance is the key word. Now, I'm not talking about that now. You talked about Headworks International. That's who I'm the Chief Technology Officer, and with me, this gentleman is a founder, co-founder of the company. Now, I'm not talking about the company, but the technology. Think about how much wastewater is generated in hospital system, and think about how you could recycle it. Not too long ago, in 2010, the state of Singapore, the country of Singapore, implemented a project, wastewater converting to drinking water. Everybody was very skeptical. And then one day, the president, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, he came to a stadium and he drank that water. And then people believed. Even then, there was a lot of doubt, there was a lot of perception. If you look at it today, on the West Coast in California, that's what is happening. Many new projects, the treated wastewater is not being directly injected into the drinking water line, but they are injected into the ground, and from that ground, the groundwater is taken out. So there is technology, and innovation is the key word. I will stop with one little thing. I'm not suggesting that Methodist or any hospital system go to that extent. But if you think about water, what is it? H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. The water that you reclaim, if you split that, that's a very established technology now. You electrolyze water. You produce hydrogen, that's a great source of renewable energy. You produce oxygen, feed it into your hospital system. You don't have to buy as much oxygen from Praxair or Air Products. So you can think about these for your future path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think that does it. Thank you, guys. This has been a wonderful panel.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. We're gonna, BGSS is gonna come up and speak next, and then we'll have a couple more minutes for additional questions for anybody else to wrap it up. I know there's another person I definitely wanted to draw attention to with Supergirl Shine Foundation over here. I'm a firm believer in sustainable workforces. You heard me earlier. So I want to make sure I give Loretta a minute, but just to make sure we stay on time, let's have Giannis step up and tie in the data storytelling component.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to?
Yes, let's do that.
Right in the middle.
Okay. I'm not any of these gentlemen. Hello. All right. So, hello everyone. I am Yannis Adoniou. I am the head of data and AI consulting for BJSS. We are sponsors today. BJSS is a technology consulting company headquartered in the UK, and we have offices here in Houston and in New York City. I'm New York City based. Eric Schmidt as well is over there, our head of the New York City office and head of delivery. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today really resonates with what you do, because what we do is data and AI. So we're talking about data storytelling here for sustainability. So I don't want to read all the slides for you. What I really want to hit is a couple of points. And those exist about how we're doing all this sustainability work. How do we actually tell that story to our stakeholders, to our audience, etc. And that includes a lot of what we call here story crafting, basically. What do I mean by story crafting is how do I turn the data into stories? Excuse me. How do I talk about emotional engagement? How do I hit my audience with interest along these lines? How do I add interactivity? How do I add meaning to the hard numbers behind our sustainability efforts? Here are the 4 ways that you should be thinking about telling those stories. Crafting a context, thinking about who the audience is, thinking about what you want to tell them, and what kind of narrative you're thinking of actually basically hitting for these people. In addition to that, think about how you're designing your story. For example, we've seen a lot of static websites. We've seen a lot of work around storytelling that really has no story in it. It's just charts and numbers and nothing else. What we're talking about here is mostly about how we take that data and that story and tell it in an interesting way. Here is an example. Here is an example from the New York Times. It's an infographic, an interactive infographic about the world's carbon budget. It tells a really interesting story in a nice visual way. In the live example, this actually has interactive elements as well. So it's a much better way of telling a story than, for example, let me go forward so I can show you something. Here's another example which I don't like, but I put in here so you can actually see that this is how a lot of companies do their storytelling about sustainability. Just a bunch of charts and numbers. Here, there's interesting information about, for example, the metrics around sustainability for Airbus. It's good numbers. It tells you what their efforts are, but it doesn't really have any sort of story. You just have to really just look at the data and just try to figure it out yourself. And there is no way for you to anchor anywhere. There's no way for you to know what this means for you necessarily. Here is a better example here from Amazon, who are also our sponsors. But I swear I picked that before that. So look at this. Look at how better this is at telling the actual story. There is an emotional connection to this story. We're talking about here how we are using food waste. That is already telling me something. There is an emotional anchor. There is also very nice graphics. It really immediately shows me what I need to do. It's very well done. It really tells the story.
it engages you and says that I've gotten this data behind this, but it's not just a boring chart. It's actually shows you how to do it. And then another excellent example I want to highlight. This is the water calculator. It's an interactive site where people can go in and enter their own ways of how they're using water. And then in an engaging way, in a graphical way, the website will actually show you how you're using your water and what this means for the environment. That is what I'm talking about. It's interactivity and emotional anchoring around data and telling a story. It's actually getting you engaged. You asked earlier, the panel actually had a very interesting discussion about how do we basically engage more people around this. That's the whole idea here as well. When you make this personal and create the emotional connection to the story and make people actually understand what this is about, you get a much better engagement from this, and you can actually more easily then help influence the policy and get people to support your sustainability initiatives. Now, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about here, and I'll go back for a sec. So what we're talking about again, creating emotional connections based on data. The whole idea here is, again, you're having all this data inside. You're using your data and AI initiatives to generate a lot of predictions, to generate data, to generate insights. All of that stuff is great. It's really great work. A lot of us here from the panel, from BJSS, et cetera, from AWS, who's here, who can help you get to that. But in order to really then make that story impactful, you really need to start thinking, creating narratives from the data. The whole point about data storytelling is creating the narrative. And then highlighting the successes, creating interactive data platforms, and doing multi-platform storytelling so you can hit your audience where it is, etc. So fundamentally, in the end, what we want to do is start thinking about, instead of, for example, having a static PDF on your website that tells you what the actual sustainability efforts you're doing are, and you're just doing this once a year for your annual report, you think about how you can actually create interactive information that will engage all your stakeholders, not just because it's the regulatory right thing to do, but it's also because it's the right thing to do for your efforts and for your communities as well. Use data-driven insights to get to there through a combination of ethical and transparent usage of data and AI. And then use all of that data and use all of that, again, let's go back to the last slide. Create information and storytelling and emotional anchor points like that to get to your story to actually resonate with people. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Yes. Well, no, that's an excellent question. I think it's kind of a chicken and egg thing here, right? So you have to do a lot of the work, the hard yards up front, to get your audience to understand that you believe that they're actual stakeholders. They're not just there to be talked to. They are stakeholders, your audience, and wherever that is, your local community, your governmental bodies, other peers in academia, hospitals, etc. They're all your peers. You have to do the real connection work to actually get them to agree, to see that this happens. And you do that by, for example, first of all, investing in the data and AI part that will get you to the point where you have a story to tell, and then investing in ways that you create those interactive experiences where people are just stakeholders in this. For example, that's why I was saying, don't just use a chart. Use a way for people to input their own information so they can create scenarios to see, for example, how they can help you do a sustainable effort, and then make them partners in your sustainability as well.
Can I add on top of that? I think, Jason, I think you and I had a conversation prior to this. Is an interesting component to it is the cost of collecting data. Data is very expensive to collect, especially from a sustainability perspective. If you're trying to capture what are the when will a motor fail, and you can gather the acoustic data. But for a company, say like NOV, for example, it's a multinational company all across the world. The cost of collecting that data is not inexpensive. So there is an infinite number. I think the story that you had provided with the McLaren, with the F1 cars, there's an infinite amount of data that you can collect, but we don't all have F1 budgets to collect all that data, right? So how do we prioritize what data is important to collect? And that's why we believe employing this customer experience approach helps us prioritize what's important to ensure that we're attributing value to the data that we're collecting, and that we're then ultimately able to turn around and tell the correct narrative.
Correct. It's a two-pronged effort. You have to have the right data, as Bryce said, but then just having that is not enough. It's not enough. You need to be able to tell that story. You can have all this good effort that you've made, but if you still cannot tell that story to the wider community that is interested in that story, then this is not sufficient.
I'm super passionate about the human component of sustainability, and I think it's an area that doesn't get enough airtime. So I do want to call attention to it, specifically since the topic was brought up earlier, and how do we do that? So I want to provide a little bit of airtime for my daughter is also a Supergirl involved, and is a member of Supergirl Shine Foundation. So we have the founder for Supergirl Shine Foundation. I would like for you to speak a little bit also to the topic about how are we making connections to our workforce back to the corporate partners that we're with, and what is a way that you're able to help support that.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryce. So one of the things that I wanted to share was Robert. I believe it was Robert talked about making sure, I don't know if he's still in the building, making sure that there's a pipeline, a pathway. And then David was speaking about human trafficking and making sure that there is opportunities for corporations to get involved. And then Claude spoke about underserved communities, and what that means is access and awareness. So I'll give you a visual. 2043, it is projected that the middle class economics for Blacks will be at a rate of $473. For Latino community, it will be $1,000 in assets. And that was accelerated because of 2020 COVID. I am Loretta Williams Grinnell, the founder of Supergirl Shine Foundation, where we are focusing on workforce solutions. One of the ways that we're doing that is making sure there's access, there's opportunity, and there's exposures to underserved communities, particularly women who are in these communities, because 70% of Harris County is 20 years and younger. They attend uneducated schools, and there are more women who are raising families. And so it's about the economics for me. So I say to you, David, you asked about what is it that we can do in reference to Houston Methodist. What is it that we can do in reference to NOV? What we can do? We are your partner. We were just at Sajiji Plasmonics on Saturday. Sajiji Plasmonics is a carbonization startup company. Trevor Best is their co-founder and spoke highly about the partnership between SGSF and how we're developing this talent to go into the workforce. So one of the things that you said is you needed a seat at the table. I invite you to be at the table, and I invite you to bring members of leaders like this at the table, because one of the things that we know is we can't do the work without corporate dollars. We can't tap into the communities without corporate dollars. We're a business entity. We just happen to be 501c3, and we are good stewards of our funding. So I come to sessions like this to say, stop talking about wanting a seat at the table. You're invited. I'm an ION partner. Our office is right here next to yours, 2 suites over. We're also members of Greentown Labs. Let's create an opportunity for the table, because I guarantee you, the people that you need to serve and the people that you are serving, we already have a relationship with. And it makes it an easier pathway and a pipeline for us to get the work done in education in underserved communities so that they can be sustained, because it's about the economics. You sustain the majority, the minority will be sustained as well. You sustain the minority, the majority will be sustained. It's about economics. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you. Thank you, Loretta. Let's see, does this mic, there you go on this microphone. Thank you. I think we had another question over here. Did you, are everyone's here? You can still dial in.
I just love everything that you just mentioned, and it's just so hard to kind of flip back to what we were talking about after the amazing words that you shared about what you guys do, and it's super girl shine. Yes, that's incredible. And so I just hate to be the person that flips it back, but just from my experience in working with companies and that are trying to create a foundation to create their sustainability metrics, right? And so I think that, and also touching on the point of where's that disconnect, does that happen, right? And so in my experience when I'm working with those companies, there was from a regulatory perspective, from the stakeholders, right? There was, compliance and regulatory things that they had to meet, right? The energy utility company. And how does that transcend from the stakeholders all the way down into the metrics, right? And so the disconnect happens when you get those regulatory standards and then you try to formulate them into the metrics. But where is it important in identifying where it's important? And then the challenges was, how do you define that, right, to the different stakeholder groups, and what does that mean to them? And then how are you communicating the same message across? Because when you take sustainability from a high level, but sustainability really is, it takes an effect at the operational level, right? And when you talk about sustainability is the new resilience, resilience is the new sustainability. Resilience is how you quickly react or withstand to something that's happening right now, right? And so sustainability cannot be looked at retrospectively. So what we did was define it and what does that look like at each level of the stakeholder? And we created metrics, in a hierarchy, or from top to bottom, bottom to top. And we started at the very foundational level at the field operations, because that's really where sustainability rolls up. Sustainability is nothing, it's high level and it's just a concept, but not until you get it into the level of foundational level of where it actually takes place. And so that was a challenge. And then we incorporated sustainability matrix. And another key thing that was extremely essential is that when it comes to sustainability, I say that it's how you bounce back, how quickly, right? And so what that actually means when you translate it into data analytics is incorporating real-time analytics. The more you can incorporate real-time analytics, the more sharper, better, and effective you can track your your sustainability for resiliency. And so, my name is Saba and I do data analytics.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's absolutely true, right? And that's why we wanted to tell the story about the data storytelling, and why we feel it's so important, because there's so much data that's out there and so much data that's available to be told. And so how do we prioritize which data that we're going to bring to focus? I don't know if anybody wanted to comment further on any of the other on that. Do we have any additional questions? Sure, absolutely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leonie Collier, and I'm part of BGS as well. I head up the design and innovation arm of our company. And I'm loving hearing all these conversations. And I think quite a lot of what people think about is the how, but it's the what and it's the what and the why that is really important. So if you think about design thinking, you think about user needs and things like that. I think what we've tried to think about is you've got your Venn diagram of, is it feasible, is it desirable, is it viable? We've kind of built in 3 extra steps in that now, in what we're thinking about when we look at products and services that we've either got or are designing. And they include, is it sustainable? Is it inclusive? And is it just? And so we kind of add those elements in to when we're looking at any product or service, whether we're reviewing a user journey or creating a blueprint. If you take those elements as well, then you can start understanding where the data could help you identify those things, or where you could be designing your service to actually help it be more sustainable. So I think you've got to kind of like come a level out of the how are we doing it into the why and the what are we doing in the first place. And you may not be able to apply it across your whole organization, but you can take that and put it into areas of things that you're working on at the moment, or you can think about your strategy. And if you then include the, is it sustainable, is it inclusive, and is it just, that starts helping you have a mindset around sustainability at the same time as profitability, which is the viability, the desirability, and the feasibility of a product or service. So I think that's something for people to kind of take away in their heads as well. I know you're really passionate about customer experience, user needs, and things like that as well, aren't you? So, you know, that's how we try and apply it now.
Perfect. Very good. One more question.
I like what you're talking about with the analytics and the data. I like about 10 years ago during the Obama when we talked about sustainability, we always talked about you can't fix it if you can't measure. So all these data analytics pop up. The problem is nobody was doing any projects. They were talking about it a lot. So one of the things I've noticed when I moved to Texas is that the city of Georgetown, Texas, got these little boys that run the city. They're trying to save money. They didn't have money in the budget, so they were evaluating their energy costs. When they looked at it, they go, "Well, the renewable energy is cheaper." They weren't sustainability. They weren't doing any data analytics. They just wanted to get a cheaper cost. So if you look around all the cities in Texas, they got the lowest cost of energy. And so how do we use this data to go, okay, if we implement this strategy at our building, what is the cost? Because it really comes down to what am I paying? So if I can say, okay, if I do low flow toilets or energy efficient windows, or if I do renewable energy or renewable water, what does it cost me? And the businesses want to know, and the consumer wants to know, how do I save money? And then we can get to getting real projects done. And when we talk about customer experience, people don't want to pay as much as they're paying. And we have a lot of strategies and technologies that are cheaper, but no one's connecting those dots. And there's a lot of availability of information out there. So I just wanted to know if there's any way you can make a calculator and say, okay, if we do this, this is what's happening. Maybe it's an AI or a what if scenario situation in your software. And that would go a long way in getting some of these projects done.
I think there's some great data visualizations and that can be had, that can tell great stories, and I think that that's part of what we try to focus. But to make those visualizations is difficult. I sometimes use the example of how Apple has been so successful, and one of the ways that they're successful is they present a product that's very simple. But there's a lot of work that goes into that simplicity to take a very, very complicated subject, and how do you distill it down to its simplest part that conveys the story, that what it is that you want to tell. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. You want to take? Yeah.
Thanks, Bryce. If I could just add one more thing to what Bryce is saying, part of where you can get that data are people like Amazon or Microsoft, right? And that you've got large providers that are out there helping power these solutions and these services. They will partner with you, right? So AWS does a lot of work around sustainability. They can show how if you use solutions based on their stack, the carbon offsets, all of the various components that are there. So the data does exist. I think what you spoke to, as much as higher motivations are great, the dollar does speak. And so being able to pull that information together and make it relevant, that's ultimately what is going to drive the CFO and the board decisions.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will close. I want to thank everybody. We've had a number of great people that have attended. I'm so excited, and I'm very thankful for everybody that has taken time out of your day and to join in the conversation. I hope everybody found this valuable. We like to host events that are go a little bit deeper in the subject matter and kind of bring people in and kind of get into some of the nuances. And just wanted to kind of do a show of hands. Did everyone feel that this was valuable? Would you like to see additional sessions like this in the future? Very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I wanted to again thank, so I'm Bryce Kramer with MesoConnect, and BGSS, our other partner, and AWS also helped. The folks here at the ION has been amazing in terms of providing the facility. And of course, thank you to our panelists for agreeing to attend, and also the Houston Methodist simulated operating room down over here is open. If anybody would like to walk down and have a look, they can give you a brief tour of that as well. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and I'm very honored and humbled for your participation today. So thank you very much.
Good stuff, man. Yeah.
Oh, I tried.
No, everything went well. Everything went well. Audio, visual.